welcome back to TC Legal Podcast. It's been a few months since we've been on here, but with the news coming out of Toronto, we definitely felt it was time to stop in and say hi again. With me today is Jeremy Newton, a criminal defense lawyer here in Calgary that I've worked with for the majority of my career. Jeremy was previously a federal prosecutor for 10 years and then decided to make the jump to private practice and opened up a firm with his partner called Under Bulwark Law. Can you tell us a little bit about why you decided to make the jump to defense work?
A number of reasons. I had a private practice before I went to the federal crown, and it's just, there's something about having seen both sides of it. You kind of appreciate the value for good defense work. I mean, there's more flexibility in terms of your lifestyle, but also it's just you get to feel like you're taking on some of the harder work. There's something about kind of being isolated as a prosecutor. You're just seeing one side of the file, see the human element of the file. It's nice again to have clients feel like you're really looking after people. You know what it's like. You've made the jump too. It's just a different way of connecting with people and almost standing up for the little guy a bit more, and maybe a bit more why you got into law to begin with. So I've enjoyed it for that reason.
Yeah, I definitely agree with it's more the reason why I got into law. I enjoyed my time in the Crown Prosecutor's Office, and I felt like there was a lot of value and responsibility in it, but it didn't have the same impact, I think, on me personally, just being able to feel like I'm helping people move forward, people who are like really trusting me to do that for them.
Yeah.
So yeah, I did. I made the jump to the Crown and then lasted much less longer than you did, only 5 years and zipped back. But I definitely think my experience at the Crown mixed with doing defense work made the news out of Toronto be a little bit more shocking. Yeah. For the viewers, I mean, obviously what we're talking about is the arrest of 7 current Toronto police members, as well as 1 retired Toronto police member, and a number of civilians who were involved in an organized crime corruption ring, essentially, that just recently came out last week. And Jeremy, obviously in advance of this conversation, I sent you the article. What was your first gut instinct when you heard about this?
Well, it just blows you away, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, my first gut instinct was I go back to thinking about, can you imagine what it was like to be a Crown in this moment and think, 10%, 20% of my files just became over.
Immediately, yeah.
Oh,
These
yeah.
officers are completely dead in the water in terms of witnesses now.
That's right, yeah. And, like you were saying before when we were talking, even if they're acquitted, effectively their careers as, frontline police officers might well be over. And their credibility is just, it's just shot. I can't imagine what it would look like to have a defense lawyer have one of these officers on the witness stand, and the Crown will see that well in advance. And that's why those, a lot of legitimate prosecutions are going to have to end, even if they were just peripherally involved because of their involvement in this case. So that's my first instinct was, I can't believe what's going to happen to all these other files. The second is just, we've seen the inside of the justice system for a long time. So the idea that it's not so much even bad actors as it is bad actions.
Yeah.
That, not all these cops are, bad cops. Not every cop that gets in trouble with the courts or gets a misconduct package is a bad cop. Maybe they made a bad decision. We've seen it from inside the Crown's office so much. How much this kind of stuff goes on and how big of an impact it can have on everyone. It was mind-blowing. How did you feel?
Yeah, I mean, funny enough, same thing. I think the first thing that I thought was definitely business things. I was like, there's about to be a lot of paper being typed up as stay letters in Toronto right now. And definitely from the Crown perspective, chatting with some of my friends that are still Crowns, being like, what are you supposed to, there's a saying that says we don't build the plane, we just fly it. And well, these planes are now basically grounded. They're not going anywhere. And it's something that does lead to a lot of concern about how the prosecution's going to handle it there. But on the, I was talking to Tahir, the other lawyer here at TC Legal, and he was like, man, this is straight out of training day. Like, it's just crazy to see the amount of corruption. I mean, obviously that's what they're describing it as, and that's a really accurate description from everything that we've read. Just like the level of participation that these officers had in taking information and providing it to known criminals, known drug traffickers, things like that, actively obstructing police investigations to protect dispensaries and assist with drug trafficking. That's Hollywood level police misconduct, to say the least. And so it was kind of shocking to see that here, north of the 49th and not in New York or Chicago or places that, Hollywood's really ramped up being that type of area. So,
The arrogance it takes to, I think, believe you can get away with that too. To be an officer standing on maybe the drug squad and saying, no, you don't look here, you look there, or to be doing these database searches, with these civilians or these other members of the justice system, knowing that you're being tracked. Every time you type in a name into one of these police databases, they have a record of it. There's just, I don't know if these people were just under duress or if they thought they could get away with it or if they just didn't care or didn't know. I have no idea, but it's mind blowing. There's some arrogance there. I can't get over it.
yeah, definitely arrogance is probably the best. I didn't think of that word, but it's a really good way to describe it. And it's probably fair because a lot of the officers who were involved in this were quite senior. I mean, the main one, the Constable Bernhardt, he's 56 years old. He's been with the force for quite some time. Another officer who was charged received like a Medal of Honor for 20 years of good service. Like, these are officers who, like you said, they know that everything's being tracked. They know every time they put their name in the computer, it can come back to them. And it just seems like they must have been extremely confident that that wasn't going to happen, which I'm a little bit of a conspiracy theorist or a little bit of a pessimist, but it makes me think like how many other people in that detachment, in that service, clearly must be involved for them to have been that confident that it wasn't going to go somewhere. And then obviously, well, it did. It blew up, quite frankly. And from exactly what you said, one of the articles says what really triggered Project South, so the whole probe into this, how deep the corruption went, if you will, was when there was an attack on a correction officer's home. Yeah. They were like, where did these people get this person's address from? And they did. They went to a police database that you normally need authorized use for, ran a search on this guy's address and was like, hey, why was this constable looking for this? Where did this come from? Yeah. And so it's just crazy how, in reading everything, how easy it was for them to find the first piece of evidence and then just break it all down.
Yeah. It sounds like it flowed pretty well after that. And can you imagine being a member of the public in these places too? I mean, we're overwhelmed and we think, like, I don't even know if it's conspiracy theory. I think it's quite obvious that there's 7 charged, but there almost certainly is more people who know, or we're just either letting it happen or just, turn a blind eye. It obviously happens in other departments and government agencies and police forces that it just never rises to the level of charges or even being caught. But can you imagine being a civilian where you're looking at your local police force and you're saying, really, guys? Like, you're taking my son away and I'm supposed to trust you that you're going to look after him, that you are, you're above board to begin with, or, I'm really trusting you that I've got this threat hanging over my head. I'm really going to trust you to look after me right now.
Yeah.
Like, guys, I can't imagine that.
Even some of the charges, like not even the bigger charges with respect to like the giving out the information or accepting like bribes to provide details on like known people in the police industry. But there's also charges relating to like stolen identities and things like that, where they seize, instead, like if you handed in a passport or a driver's license or something like that, they, instead of logging those in evidence and using them for what they were supposed to, some officers are charged with holding on to them and then providing them to criminal organizations or known criminals for whatever reason in exchange for bribes or in exchange for money and things like that, which is a huge problem because then not only are you worried that the police aren't doing their job, you're worried that the driver's license that you handed in because you got an impaired driving or a speeding ticket or it was just seized or whatever is now being used by some criminal to do God knows what, right? So it just, I think, the news has been very clear that it's a huge hit to public trust. Yeah. And I think that might even be an understatement. Like, it's going to be a really high hill for them to climb back over.
The only reason why the police get to do what they do and to have the level of authority they have is because we trust them. We trust, okay, you are the people who can carry guns in public. You are the people who, if you say stop, we stop. Because we understand, right? But most people understand, I don't speed, but if someone's speeding, the police will stop them. I don't do this. I don't react emotionally in this way. I don't make this mistake because I will get caught, or, I can trust that if someone hurts me or my family, the police will look after us. Like you said, if I give you my passport, for example, because you have the authority to detain it for a while, I trust that you're not going to abuse that. I trust that you're not going to abuse the fact that I called police to report this issue, that maybe I'm having a domestic issue, maybe, my neighbors are dealing drugs or something like that, that you're not going to use that information and I might not get hurt. I trust you. And if I can't trust my police, what are we doing here?
Yeah.
I did appreciate how, forced or otherwise, the police officers out of Toronto who are doing these news conferences, they are not holding back, at least in my perception.
Yeah.
And I mean, that has to be the way. That's the only hope. But I still appreciate that's happening. It's quite clear. These officers, they're not who we thought they were. We say they did this and these horrible things right under our nose, and at least they're owning that.
Yeah, I mean, I've read, I was listening to one of the conferences where I think it's District 12 is the main one. The chief there was like, I became aware early on that there was an investigation going on. And even though I wasn't part of it, I made it very clear that we were going to be cooperating.
Yeah.
And I think that's what they have to do at this point, because like you said, everybody who's left behind right now, they have to rebuild a reputation that's now been destroyed.
That's right.
It's just been completely tanked. And so it's also like, I think, very unfortunate timing. And I don't want to dive into this because it's just a really sensitive topic for a whole host of reasons. I think it's like very unfortunate timing that this comes out when everything in the United States is happening with ICE and federal agents that are really struggling with public trust at this point because, well, one, there's the ton of protests, there's the 2 killings that happened in Minnesota, and so it's very unfortunate timing that we're now dealing with this huge breach of trust when south of the 49th, it's a bit of a hot mess in terms of agency trust.
Yeah. But like you said, we always like to think that we here in Canada were somehow removed from that we are not above that, but that just doesn't happen to us. We're a different type of person, and people are still people. It's going to happen, and it's shattering for that reason too, isn't it?
Yeah. But I will say, and I mean, I kind of chatted with you before we started that I was going to bring this up. It is interesting going through this corruption because as defense counsel, I mean, there's a lot of times that we're very worried that we're not always getting the whole story, and we're concerned that police maybe aren't providing all the information. And I'll start here. I'll say this. I mean, out of all my time in the Crown's office, all my time as defense, I think for the most part, an overwhelming majority of police officers, RCMP, CPS, EPS, they're there to do a really good job, and they want to do a good job, and they take it seriously, and they appreciate the role they have in society. And so the majority of this conversation applies to 1% of the force that we're dealing with. Yeah. But I do think it's something that as defense counsel, at least for me, at every file, I'm always wondering whether or not I received all the information, whether or not somebody's saying something that's maybe not true or is a little bit misleading, and how you can go about proving that. And when you look at, like you said, the arrogance of some officers thinking that they're able to get away with a lot of things and that nobody's ever going to find out, or these things can be swept under the rug, it raises concerns again in my dark little conspiracy mind where I'm like, they're doing this intentionally. Just the 1%, though. The 1% are doing it intentionally. And I think that we chatted about this earlier today. A lot of that comes down to what they disclose and what we can find that's missing.
Yeah.
So.
And there always is something missing, isn't there? And I don't know if you're finding it more and more these days. It feels like when we get our disclosure, the Crown's case against us, which only comes to them from the police, we don't get it all at first. And we have to ask for things by name. Well, of course I want, third officer on the scene's body-worn camera. He actually talks to my client.
Yeah.
And you have to, the idea that you have to ask for that, and it can take 6 to 8 months for that to come through. It's mind-blowing. I get files from clients who tried to handle the file on their own for 6 months, and they say, I need a lawyer. And they say, here, I've got the whole Crown disclosure. They gave me everything. It's not everything.
No.
Right? And the idea that, we almost have to ask for things from the police that they know they need to provide. It's disappointing. I get that there are resource issues, but I have found on many occasions that the last items to come in are usually the most compelling.
They're the items that make or break whether or not the Crown's even going to think it's worthwhile to go ahead.
That's right. Or is there a good charter issue here? Is what the first officer said, does it really hold water when you view it through the eyes of someone who's standing next to them?
Yeah. And that's something I think I tell my clients all the time. I'm like, look, until I can see all of the police disclosure, I'm going to have my initial meeting with you. I'm going to figure out, generally speaking, what we're dealing with. And then I want to know what the police have. And I want to know particularly what they're going to give. Yeah. Because they're the Crown has to prove it. And they have to prove it with what the police give them. And so I think it's always like the best starting point. But you're right. Sometimes you're waiting 4, 5, 6 months to get video. And the one thing I always say to the Crown, because that's who we talk to, right? We don't talk to the police and be like, you're not giving this. Right. We talk to who's effectively an intermediate in the disclosure game, if you will.
Yeah.
Which, as a side note, is something I think I really came to understand as a Crown. Because in the first couple of years of my defense practice, I was like, I don't understand why they won't just give this to me. They must have it. And then at the time working at the Crown's office, I realized that I did not have it. I was not the one not giving it to defense.
Yeah.
It was just like a constant battle to try to get things in a timely manner.
Yeah.
And definitely resources is a problem, but at some point it's also just, there are definitely times that I felt that it just wasn't a priority. The amount of times I got the impression from people being like, why do they need it? It doesn't matter. And I'm like, but it does matter. One, because they asked for it, and two, if you don't give it to them, then I cannot help you. Like I'm just kind of stuck with a very broken plane if we go back to the first analogy that I had. But then, in some instances, the solution that I think the government and some judicial decisions has had is to just kind of rule that it's not really important. And I mean, one of the things that really frustrates me in this day and age, if you will, where almost everything's video recorded. Almost all police vehicles have in-car video. Yeah. Most police officers, including our CMP lately, have body-worn camera. But in an area that we practice a decent amount here, doing immediate roadside suspensions and administrative impaired driving allegations, the legislation specifically allows for video evidence to not be provided. Yeah. And for me, that's a huge problem with the IRS regime in particular, because obviously you're not allowed to cross-examine police officers. You're not allowed to really call witnesses, nothing like that. Whatever's in the police report is assumed to be taken under oath, and you can't really impeach it. You can get your client to contradict it, which gives a he said, she said. But there's a section in the legislation that gets renewed every couple of years because there's a time limit on it, where they've said you do not have to provide your video evidence, even though they have it because it's their policy to make it. And for me, that is almost like a rubber stamped form of evading what actually happened. And which is ridiculous to me, because I would say 90% of the time, the video is probably going to show something pretty close to what the cop said, or between what my client and the police says. Nobody's ever 100% perfect. And so it's mind-boggling to me that they just are legislating that it doesn't have to be provided.
It's really disappointing. And, you and I know full well the file's there. It's on the officer's desk. They just have to click upload, walk away, get a cup of coffee, and by the time you come back, it's uploaded. Because we've seen it. I'm sure you've seen IRS files where, some good RCMP officer who isn't bound by the CPS policy says, sure, I'll upload it. I have it. Sure. We know it's there. But how many files have we had where it's also just, well, this officer says this is exactly how it happened. Take my word for it.
And they don't upload it.
No.
Which is frustrating, because also at the top of their notes, it'll say their body-worn camera unit was 6743. So they have it. Yeah. And they started in case there's criminal charges, because obviously that legislation doesn't apply to a criminal investigation. In a criminal investigation, they're going to have to hand over that video. And at the time they pull someone over, they don't know if it's going to be criminal or administrative. So 99% of the time, that video's there. They've just been given legislative permission to not give it to us.
And how many times have you seen on a criminal file where there's a difference between what the officer perceives and writes down and what's actually on the video?
It's huge.
Yeah. They're humans.
Yeah.
Right? It happens all the time. And our government's really letting us down, because they love this expedient impaired driving regime. Okay, charge him, 7 days to appeal. If not, you're done. Even if you appeal, 20% chance you win. And, everyone just gets convicted. And the only reason they get away with it is because it's not criminal charges. But really, I feel like our courts and our government especially is letting us down, and they're authorizing the system. I was talking to Braylon in my office earlier, one of the other lawyers that we work with, and she was saying, it's in some parts of Canada, maybe you think, okay, well, driving a vehicle, we say it's a privilege. But in Alberta, we look at, is it really? I think it's higher than that. It's not a right, but it sure is a necessity. Like, those laws in our Supreme Court doesn't seem to recognize all the time. If you live in rural Alberta, you can't not have a driver's license. You just can't.
No.
Unless you live and work in downtown Calgary or Edmonton, you pretty much need a driver's license to function in this province. And yet we're so quick to take them away with this IRS regime without due process. The government lets us down. And it's very frustrating, this disclosure that they're basically saying, we know it exists, we're just going to cover our eyes. Our notes are enough. And off you get convicted on that.
Yeah, it's like a frustrating process when you see them, because obviously there was debate, there was discussion about whether or not this was going to be the case, about why this was the best course of action. And the only possible answer is efficiency, because there's never a situation where having the video is not the best source of evidence for what happened. It's a video. right? And so the only possible reason is we just don't want to risk it. We don't want to risk this, side railing things or making things go not the way they want them to. It's just an efficiency argument.
Efficiency towards convictions.
Yeah.
Yeah, not just an efficient process, because no one really cares about not having to watch a 30-minute video. You want convictions.
Also, in reality, you're not playing that video in front of it. Like it's the efficiency argument. I think has a lot of flaws to it for sure. But in comparison to what's going on in Toronto, I think the other difficulty is it just sends a message to the police that we're just not worried about it.
Yeah.
We're not worried about it. You don't have to worry about it. Whatever you say, we're going to accept. We're going to accept whatever you say, and they can write it in their notes, and then we're stuck with it. We'll never know any different.
That's right. All the best cops I know love body-worn camera.
Oh, yeah.
They love it. Their complaints go down. They're, the ones that do good work, their files, they don't go to trial because it's there for everyone to see, right?
Yeah.
The ones who are worried about video getting disclosed are the cops who are kind of just flying by the seat of their pants, or the police agencies that just aren't training their officers well enough.
Yeah. Or, files where things went sideways or maybe mistakes were made,
Sure.
which is fine.
Yeah.
But then a Crown reviews it, decides that it shouldn't go forward, and that's the appropriate remedy as opposed to just trying to sweep it under the rug in some way.
Yeah.
And
Which
so
is what this feels like, isn't it?
that's what it feels like to me, again, with my little conspiracy mind, but
you've seen both sides. So I think you can kind of appreciate that there's probably something to that.
Yeah. And I think, again, going back to say, most cops that I've dealt with have been very professional. They're there for a reason and they should have that job 100%. And then there's some officers, luckily I've not had to deal with very many of them, who are just like, I don't think you need that. It doesn't matter. They're guilty anyways. Why give them an opening? And I've had an officer say that to me before. If I give that to you, defense is going to make a big deal of it. And I'm like, well, then that's probably something we should know about. We should be talking about this right now. And so it just kind of goes back to, what you described as arrogance. They're just like, we've taken care of it. Just trust us. It'll be fine.
Yeah.
And having that behavior, and then you have, what we have in Toronto where they're accepting bribes and actively engaging with, known criminals to assist them. That's where you start, the public trust then takes a real hit for sure. And I think as defense counsel, we're immediately like, taken aback for sure at the size of it, but not necessarily taken aback that it happened.
And the concept of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Because I think it underlies the majority of, like, every time you look at a case, you are looking at it with the assumption that probably something can be dug up somewhere.
Yeah. And it's why most defense lawyers, it's why we keep track of officer misconduct. We see an officer in the news, we know an officer, was involved in this on this case, or there's a reported case. Keep track of it because those officers will come up again and again, right? So that's part of our job too, right? Is to make sure that, these bad actors, this 1%, or even decent officers who make a mistake, but that mistake could impact our clients' rights in their own case, that sees the light of day.
Yeah. And it could also impact like credibility, reliability, and just as defense counsel, when you are assessing your client's case, that's something you got to be alert to across the board because you don't want to miss out on a readily available defense for your client if it could have been avoided, obviously. I think that's the best way to say it. In your time with the federal, because federal prosecution does mostly drugs and guns and, a lot of more serious stuff than just the province, which I say hesitantly because the province obviously deals with quite a bit of serious in terms of violence and things like that. But drugs and guns tend to be like the more exciting stuff to prosecute, things like that. So in your time with the federal prosecutions, did you ever have any, I doubt on this magnitude, or obviously we'd heard about it, but any sort of similar behavior to what we're seeing out of the Toronto episode?
I mean, not to this level. When I was prosecuting in the areas outside of Calgary about 10 years ago, we had one officer who got in trouble for effectively, and it was in the news. He was breaking into a residence, steal evidence, and so it became every file with that officer on it was just done. That was it. Anything they touched, that officer had no credibility whatsoever. You couldn't possibly put that witness on the stand and hope for anything resembling a fair trial for the accused, or even advance for a conviction. And so a lot of good police work, a lot of went out the window. A lot of people who had made really big mistakes didn't get prosecuted. And someone was human, made a big mistake, and it's the ripple effects were just they just went on for years. I never experienced something quite like what we saw in Toronto. But I mean, you hear about it from other prosecuting agencies, other police agencies. But
Mhm.
personally, that was the biggest exposure I had.
The situation that you're describing here in Alberta that you were, how did it come to light? Was there, was it just a mistake on a file that was flagged, or was it some manner of an investigation?
No, there was definitely an investigation. I can't remember what caused it to exist. It happened in a smaller town, so I don't think it was that difficult to figure out and kind of find more information once people started digging. Yeah, I don't think it was a mistake. I think it was, I mean, it was a pretty brazen act.
Yeah.
And so once it got caught, it all just kind of fell apart.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things, I don't think we touched on it before. I mean, one of the things that I was reading about with the Toronto is that um, like the biggest part of it just seemed to be accessing otherwise fairly innocuous information.
Yeah.
It's just who it was provided to.
Yeah.
And it was provided to people to coordinate shootings, to coordinate different sort of criminal activities, or to like stake out their house or things like that. And so I don't know, just, yeah, I mean, going back to the first question you asked me about like how it hit me, it was just, putting aside to hear comparing it to a TV show and the news obviously describing it in a very serious manner, which they definitely should. I think the first time that I thought about it, not with my lawyer hat, I was like, man, that's why people don't want to pull over. And that's why people have like little placemats that say, show me a warrant, and don't want to, because there are, you don't want to believe that they're there. But when you see them that close to home, you're like, oh, that's not good. That's bad.
No, I mean, odds are you will never encounter a police officer in your life who is that kind of person. You probably won't, but it will be in your head. Right?
Yeah,
And
you're just like, you never know, right?
you never know. Yeah. And I mean, here we are, just a couple of white people sitting here talking about what it's like, what do we pull over for the police or not? And this is corruption stuff. I mean, I can't, this is just a different level of it, but I can't even imagine being, a person of color having to, already wonder about like, am I safe in this situation? That's a totally different ball of wax. But now we're seeing a whole different angle of a reason why maybe I don't trust my police officer. And it's really unfortunate because, like you said, 99% good people wouldn't do this.
Yeah. I mean, you've been doing it longer than me. I've been doing it for 14 years. And I would say for the majority, 99.5% of the police officers I deal with, do they make mistakes? Sure. Are they professional about it? Do they acknowledge it? Do we move on? Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so then when you have, the police blow up in the media like they are right now, you're like, oh, you just wonder if you're ever going to run into them. Even my neighbor, she once said that if somebody tried to pull her over, and she's white, she's female as well, but I think she's just like a little bit more shy than I am, like a little bit more quiet. And she's like, yeah, I live out like on a road, like you have to go down the highway sometime. And so if you got pulled over on the highway, there's nobody around. And she's like, I'm not pulling over for the police. I would drive into town and pull over like at No Frills or Safeway.
Yeah.
And I was saying to her, I was like, that's flight from the police. Like you shouldn't do that.
Yeah.
As your unofficial lawyer, you should probably pull over. And she's like, I'm not doing that. And she's never had a real negative interaction with the police either.
Yeah.
But she's like, no, it's scary because lots of them are men, they have guns, and there's nobody out there.
Yeah.
And I know that there's videos, and I know that there should be videos, and she's just a random member of the public who's never even been involved with the police. And she's like, how do I know they're going to give them the video?
That's right.
And so it's weird. It's weird to be in this job and have a lot of respect for everything that the police do, even though we're on opposite sides.
Yeah.
And then interact with members of the public and just watch the press conferences about this and see like people who don't have that opinion of the police, even though they've never dealt with them.
That's right.
And presumably should trust the police.
Yeah.
And then you wonder if there's got to be like a bit of an ongoing problem of just general members of the public who've never had a specific personal reason to feel that way, just have that doubt about whether or not they can trust them.
I'm sure you've had clients say that to you.
Oh, for me, I've had clients say that for sure.
But clients, like you said, who might have no reason otherwise to doubt it, but you just get pinged with all these things in your, in the news, radio, on your phone, just these little bits of doubt.
Yeah.
And then, or, maybe they have a mind that goes to a place of lacking trust anyway. They don't trust the government, but these things don't help. And so now all of a sudden these clients feel like you said, oh, I'm not pulling over for this cop.
Yeah.
Our court of appeal says you go to jail for a year, which, it's a wide gulf, and then we have to clean up that mess. And oh man, it's really unfortunate because I think, defense lawyers, part of our job is to find issues with the way the police conducted their investigation. But deep down, we still want good police officers as members of our community. we're still members of the community, and we still want the police officers to treat our clients fairly, to find out when someone is committing a crime, to make sure that the community is safe. We still want that.
And to do it in a manner that means there's going to be consequences for those people, for sure.
Of course. We all want that too. But, you've talked to clients, I'm sure, who just make you think, oh man, I just really hope you don't get pulled over anytime soon, because you're going to get in a lot of trouble for beliefs that I don't want to say are unreasonable, but
are rarely founded. I think they're rarely founded,
they are. But
the concern's real.
The noise just keeps getting louder, which is unfortunate.
Well, Jeremy, thanks for coming in to chat with me about this. I think we can both agree that we don't envy Toronto Police having to rebound from this particular situation. And I appreciate you coming in to chat about it in such a short turnaround.
Thanks for having me.
And hopefully we'll have you back on another matter.
Anytime.
Thanks so much for watching.